Time to do the job. Time to do the job! Behold the jobber of jobbers. Danimal Daniel Jobber.
What's up, everybody? This is Alberta area's own D-Job, Danimal Daniel Jobber, with another Jobbing It with Danimal Daniel Jobber 205 Live and WWE Cruiserweight Report. We got a lot of stuff to talk about this week. Oof. Very exciting week in wrestling. First off, of course, at WWE Backlash, Alberta's own Jinder Mahal becomes WWE Champion by beating Randy Orton in the main event. Jinder Mahal was, of course, born in Calgary and is the nephew of the great Gama Singh, back from the old Stampede wrestling days from when I was a kid. And he is Alberta's first WWE champion since Bret the Hitman Hart from about 20 years ago. Very exciting news for Alberta wrestling. Of course, last week we had two wrestling events. First off, NXT TakeOver Chicago on Saturday night. And this was actually an amazing show as I suspected it would be. I pretty much define it as an A show. There was only one title change in the show, and that was when Pete Dunne beat Tyler Bate for the United Kingdom Championship. In the other matches, Asuka retained the Women's NXT Championship. The glorious Bobby Roode retained the NXT Championship, and the Authors of Pain retained the Tag Team Championship. Following that match, Tommaso Ciampa shocked everybody by attacking Johnny Gargano, breaking up DIY, and setting an uncertain future in the tag team division of NXT. Backlash was a decent show with some decent wrestling, although some of the results I wasn't totally impressed with. I was kind of frustrated that Sami Zayn got the victory over Baron Corbin, as Sami Zayn getting big victories over a wrestler that's supposed to be a monster heel, but hasn't actually won any real matches at a pay-per-view is just underwhelming. They really need to build up Baron Corbin as a monster heel and have him win some major matches at pay-per-views before they start having baby faces go over him to build themselves up. Also, Shinsuke Nakamura made his triumphant debut in WWE with a pretty nice victory over Dolph Ziggler. Dolph Ziggler actually put on a pretty good show and pretty much did everything he could do besides beat Shinsuke Nakamura, hitting all his moves, and Nakamura kicked out of them all before finally hitting the King Shasa, getting the victory. Also, Kevin Owens and AJ Styles had probably the match of the night going, just beating the heck out of each other and putting on a great show. But unfortunately, the ending was rather disappointing when AJ Styles' foot fell into the announce table and got caught in a bunch of wires, and AJ Styles was counted out. It was fitting that Kevin Owens retained the title, but the way he retained the title was just rather underwhelming and a pretty sad way to end a really entertaining match. So anyways, the overall pay-per-view, I had trouble even giving a C- to. It could have even been a D. I mean, the wrestling was pretty decent for most of the matches, but the overall results were a little disappointing. But of course, Jinder Mahal winning the WWE Championship, huge news for Alberta wrestling, and I mean, that really just brought the excitement out of me, man. I totally marked out for the big victory by our Jinder Mahal. Anyways, if you do want to go back and watch it, I'd say it's worthwhile to a point anyways. Certainly a portion of the pay-per-view was rather skippable. But I mean, if you like really good wrestling, you may want to watch the whole thing. It was pretty decent anyways. Just not an epic show. Certainly not anywhere near the caliber of NXT TakeOver Chicago. That was a really amazing, solid show, and it may actually be a contender for Show of the Year, especially with the Gargano and Ciampa breakup at the end. That I don't know, I sure didn't see coming. I actually had a video on Instagram where I went on to report that Gargano and Ciampa were going to the main roster because the fans were starting to thank them, and it looked like they were basically wishing them well and off to the main roster. And as I go on for a couple of seconds, behind me I see in the Instagram video, Ciampa attack Gargano and it totally catches me off guard, and I managed to catch the action firsthand right the very moment it happened, seconds into an Instagram video. It was just perfect. I was really proud of that video. Anyways, following that, on Monday Night, Raw was rather boring, just leading into Extreme Rules, where Brock Lesnar's opponent for Great Balls of Fire will be decided in a fatal five-way between Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Finn Balor, Bray Wyatt, and Samoa Joe. They had the 5 of them in various matches in the show, including 4 of them involved in matches against each other. On SmackDown Live, They determined the 6 competitors for the Money in the Bank pay-per-view coming up in a month, which is this year a SmackDown exclusive Money in the Bank. And we're going to have Sami Zayn, Baron Corbin, Dolph Ziggler, AJ Styles, Luke Harper, and Kevin Owens all competing for the Money in the Bank briefcase. And if any of you are not familiar with that, that is the briefcase that gives the winner a title match whenever he wants, and of course normally whatever title he wants to go after. But this year being a SmackDown Live branded pay-per-view, it will likely be only for the WWE Championship. Also on SmackDown Live, they had a amazing celebration for Jinder Mahal's championship victory. Just a really cool and colorful Indian dance festival. Really entertaining to see. If you didn't get a chance to see that, I urge you to go back and check it out. Nice to celebrate our Jinder Mahal and just wish him well on what will likely be a long title reign, as the India tour is not until September, and you wouldn't think he would be dropping the title before then, as they'll probably want to bring in the title to India. So we could be in for a long title reign for him right through SummerSlam. So wish him well. I hope he does a great job selling the WWE to India, because that would be a huge mark in his career if he could make Vince McMahon proud in that manner. Anyways, later on this week, I plan to do a piece on a couple of big issues that have just been plaguing my mind in the world of professional wrestling. First off, the issue with the Broken Hardy gimmick between Matt Hardy, well, the Hardy Boys in general, and Impact Wrestling, which is formerly known as TNA. This just highlights a real issue between creative content between the wrestling organization and the performer who has a hand in developing a lot of the material. I mean, really, in traditional, movie roles, the person who writes the script creates the role, and the actor just takes the role and acts it out. So obviously, the rights are 100% belonging to the person who creates the movie, even if the actor does give a little of their own personality and their own take, and even if they improv small parts of it. For the most part, the movie role has been created and developed by the movie producer. However, in wrestling, often there's a very strong creative collaboration between the performer and the wrestling organization or the promoter. Or in the case of this, the creative team behind character development. Normally, the organization can claim quite a bit of responsibility, as they put a lot of money into it. They invested in the character. They put the character on TV. However, in the case of the Broken Hardy gimmick, Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy, to an extent, put a lot of effort into developing this character and creating this persona that's taken off. And really, I can understand their perspective too, that they really have a huge vested interest in this character, and they invested a lot of themselves, and Matt Hardy his own personal reputation in creating this character. So really, when he says, I should have some claim to this character, he's not totally wrong either. And this really is, for me, sparking a debate regarding creative control in character development in professional wrestling. Now, in this case, it's pretty much cut and dried, because it's a matter for the courts. The courts will make a decision, and of course, WWE has really expressed very little interest, apparently, in carrying on the Broken Hardy gimmick. As typical Vince, he doesn't like to endorse any creative character that he didn't himself help create. And of course, really, if he wanted the character, all he had to do would be to fork up the dough, and really, he could afford to buy the Matt Hardy gimmick, or the Broken Hardy gimmick, if he really wanted to. So, really, there's not a lot of issues in this particular case that we can do about it. However, thinking about it, the issue really originated at one time between the Matt Hardy, the performer, the organization TNA, and the agent. And perhaps if this contract that was created had been developed in a different way, maybe the dispute wouldn't have happened. And so, maybe as a wrestling community, we can learn from this situation, and going forward, use that as a guideline to how wrestling performers treat going into the investment of developing a major character where they're putting themselves on the line, in a sense. Especially an established wrestling performer like Matt Hardy, for example, who really, to some extent, earned the right to create his own character and deserved the respect of the organization to have a character put on television. And so really, there should be some, perhaps, ownership of this role, a character role, by the performer in this case, perhaps. Anyways, I want to look deeper into the issues around this and see if we can learn anything for the future from it. Secondly, I want to look into the issue of YouTube putting professional wrestling content into an advertiser-unfriendly category, reducing revenue for most or all professional wrestling content creators due to pressures of boycott from a large number of advertisers who don't want their brand associated with various types of content. This is a really big issue, because wrestling content creators who have made a living off of this material they create are now struggling to do so because a huge chunk of their revenues have been cut. Now, on a side note, us at the Edmonton Sports Podcast Network are trying to combat the issue by joining the platform known as VidMe. If you want to help, please look us up on vid.me and subscribe, as we need a certain number of subscribers to become verified, so we can start using this platform in a similar way to how we have had to use YouTube in the past. In either case, I'll be discussing the issue from both a neutral perspective, basically analyzing the position of YouTube and its various advertisers, along with those of the content creators, and of course as well as from the content creators' perspective directly. So be sure to watch for news on this on my Twitter or on my Facebook Danimal Daniel Jobber page for details in the next couple of days as to when this piece is going to be launched and what format it's going to be in. Finally, before beginning the Cruiserweight coverage this week, here's my pal Mr. Pyre with a special message. Today's episode of Jobbing Out with Danimal Daniel Jobber is brought to you by Edmonton Oilers Reinforced Men's Briefs, with extra support for your team. Thank you, Mr. Pyre. We really appreciate that. No problem, Daniel. You know me. I'm always looking for extra support with it. Gones! My pal, Mr. Pyre, everybody. And now to this week's Cruiserweight action. So first off, on main event, we have Rich Swan. Ooh, can you handle this? Ooh, can you handle this? Against Davari. And this match was a result of the backstage segment from last week's 205 Live, where Rich Swan directed a trick package which was meant from Noam Dar to him to be given to Davari. Of course, when Davari opened the package, it blew white dust all over his fancy, expensive clothes. This was a fun match. At one point, Swan grabs Davari's arms and controls them like a puppet, making him do the Rich Swan, ooh, can you handle this dance? They continue to try to develop Davari's character as a rich and overly privileged chic-type character who has expensive clothes and buys expensive items. He has lots of money and he's better than you. Davari almost wins with a froggy splash from the top turnbuckle, but Rich Swan says no on the 2 count. Then Swan wins moments later by suddenly rolling over Davari for a quick sudden pin. And of course, Davari acts like a sore loser, only further developing the hatefulness of his character. You're the mean one, Mr. Davari. Then we had a surprise bonus match, as I was watching the UK Championship special, and they actually had the Cruiserweights on there, with TJP and the Brian Kendrick tag teaming up with Rich Swan and a local UK performer named Dan Maloney. And this is a great way to give the Cruiserweights some additional exposure by showcasing them in a tag team match on this, the UK Championship special. Having Swan team up with local favorite Dan Maloney against 2 big Cruiserweight heels made for a very entertaining showcase. The only way they could have made it better is if they would have had a story to match it, but anyways, once again, the English crowd was absolutely amazing through this entire show, this match included. They even bought right into TJP's heel persona and started chanting, TJP's a wanker, a TJP's a wanker. It was funny, too, because Jim Ross, who was a guest commentator, acted like he didn't even know what a wanker was and had to be given a rough idea by Nigel. Anyways, despite the crowd behind the babyface team, TJP and Kendrick steal a victory when Kendrick rolls up Maloney with a handful of tights and gets the 3 count, and the heels leave the ring fairly quickly, gloating their victory. That sucks, baby! Oh, hell no! That is the worst Jimmy Hart impression ever. Never do that again, Daniel Jobber. Never! Anyways, this match and this show as a whole was pretty good. I urge you to see it on the WWE Network if you get a chance. So anyways, then on Monday Night Raw, we have Akira Tozawa versus Davari with the Brian Kendrick watching backstage. This match was a short, energetic squash match to promote the street fight between Tozawa and the Brian Kendrick on 205 Live this week. Kendrick is watching backstage, reminding the audience that he is the teacher. Anyways, I won't go into too much detail on the match, as the Cruiserweight matches on Raw were fairly criticized for being too short, too random, and for not developing a direct storyline. However, Tozawa really got the crowd into it with this ha, ha, ha chant. A large portion of the crowd seemed to be chanting along with him this time, which is really good to see. His battle cry is really catching on, and the energy with which Tozawa delivers it is really infectious. I really love covering Tozawa's matches because he gets the crowd into it almost all the time now. I still feel that Tozawa deserves a title shot on a pay-per-view in the near future. However, with TJP on the horizon, I'm not confident he's going to get it. Anyways, Akira Tozawa wins the match, showing off a different type of finisher from his usual Shining Wizard. He hits a high-flying senton from the top turnbuckle. This move will actually turn out to be big in the street fight with Kendrick on 205 Live. Spoiler alert! In between Cruiserweight matches on Raw was an encounter between Sasha Banks and Alicia Fox with Noam Dar, in which Noam Dar attempts to insult Banks. Later on, Sasha Banks squashes Alicia Fox in a match, and afterwards Noam Dar confronts Sasha and gets slapped for his efforts. However, Alicia Fox attacks Sasha Banks from behind and leaves her laying on the mat while Dar and his Alicia Fox celebrate smugly, hopefully building some additional recognition and heat for Noam Dar. Then later on, we have Tony Nese with Neville versus Austin Aries. This is another semi-pointless match just to give Aries and Neville a reason to interact to create hype for their upcoming championship match at Extreme Rules, which has been announced to be a submission match actually, by the way, meaning that the only way to win is by making one's opponent tap out. They really need to stop throwing together random matches for this purpose on Raw though, and have some sort of quick story interaction at least to trigger the match. Why should Austin Aries be suddenly taking on Tony Nese? Matches need to happen, but there seems to be no rhyme or reason to the matchups they have on Raw to show off all the side stuff. The criticisms against the Cruiserweight division from people who mostly watch them on Raw is founded. There is just all too often no storyline reason for the Cruiserweight matches themselves. Anyways, Neville gives some advice to Nese before Aries comes to the ring, and then stays to watch the match. Of course, Neville's not at ringside to get involved, eh? Actually, he wasn't. This really was pretty much a squash match, too, although they tried to sell up Tony Nese a bit, and of course Austin Aries tries to sell his injured leg. Austin Aries wins fairly easily with the last chancery, however. After the match, Aries gets out of the ring fairly quickly, and Neville enters the ring to stare him down as he's leaving. Then, I guess to show off his superiority, Neville decides to put the Rings of Saturn submission hold on a Tony Nese, who he was supposed to be cheering for. Such a strange way to add hype for a championship match, having Neville hurt Austin Aries' opponent after he's finished with him, just to make some sort of visual statement to him without any physical contact? I don't know. It didn't do too much for me. They could really have skipped this entire match and this entire segment. Then finally we have 205 Live. Before the show, they show a really good promo from the Brian Kendrick recapping the entire story with Akira Tozawa leading up to how he beat the heck out of Tozawa 2 weeks ago in frustration after the way he lost to him. He ends the promo by saying that a street fight plays into his strengths and that he intends to teach Tozawa one final lesson in the street fight later on. So anyways, first off we have Rich Swann versus Davari. Once again the same match pairing that they had on Main Event. This time they recap the backstage segment package, however, to show the story behind the match. The announcers also play up the fact that Davari is so rich, and Rich Swann comes from a poor background. They continue to try to develop Davari's character as they continue to make him lose matches, though. 3 matches for him this week, and all were relatively squash match losses. This is really starting to look like a budget-cutting method, using the same few competitors on Raw and 205 Live. It does make the Cruiserweight division look kind of cheap and boring, however, only further feeding the criticisms against it. Anyways, this is a slightly longer and better match this time, of course, as they typically get a bit more time to work on 205 Live, and the announcers attempted to further develop Davari's character, but ultimately the result was the same. This time, Rich Swann wins the match with his finisher, the Phoenix Splash, however. Having the same pairing from Main Event go at it again on 205 Live without any connection to each other is really lazy booking and storytelling in my book. All he had to do was have Davari cut a quick promo of how Swan stole a victory from him the last time they met, and this time he's going to get his revenge. Better yet, why not have the underdog heel steal the victory on Main Event, and have the 205 Live match be about having the babyface get justice for the way he lost? Bad enough they have this arrogant, I got lots of money and I'm better than you character who you're supposed to hate, but who always loses regardless. Davari has to steal a victory or two so that fans can see him as a threat, and not just a cartoon character to laugh at while the hero beats him up. So anyways, Rich Swann gets the win and gets to celebrate with the fans in the ring, right? No. Out comes Noam Dar out of nowhere and attacks Rich Swann. And once again, him and Alicia Folks get to celebrate smugly, continue their reign of terror. And if you don't like them and what they're trying to do, they don't give two folks. After this, they recap the title rivalry, and then Neville and Austin Aries have a side-by-side frame promo off. The promo off is one of these two's best work, but essentially the same things they've been saying to each other all through the rivalry. I think the problem is that the rivalry has just gone on for too long and really needs to end. They have several things they can do. First off, they can have Neville retain the title once again at Extreme Rules, then have TJP turn on Neville for not keeping his word, and let TJP then compete against Neville for the Cruiserweight title. The nice thing about that is that we don't have to see a rematch between Neville and Aries in this case. Consequently, though, they could have TJP get frustrated and find some way to cost Neville the match, figuring that he'd have a better chance of a title shot if Aries was champion. Then they have TJP feud with Aries for a while. They could even have TJP eventually win the feud and have Akira Tozawa finally get his title shot, and eventually reign as Cruiserweight champion. With this choice, we would have to see an unfortunate rematch between Neville and Aries, however. But if they just get it over with, I'd sooner that than have these two continue to feud with the same thing over and over and over again. I just can't handle this feud any longer. Anyways, after this, we finally have the long-awaited return of Cedric Alexander. He wins a quick squash match against a guest performer who I believe was named Johnny Boone, although several other names sound so similar, it's hard to be sure. That's what the announcers were saying. Anyway, Cedric Alexander wins a quick match with his lumbar check and a pin for the 3 count. Cedric Alexander is officially back on 205 Live. Then they have another quick promo vignette where Drew Gulak looks and talks like a political candidate, delivering his campaign message. He once again states that he represents the time-honored cruiserweight technical wrestling style, and that fans deserve this, and that he's not a fan of the showboat high-flying style. If he wanted to see that, he'd go to Cirque du Soleil. The only thing he doesn't say is, "I'm Drew Gulak, and I approve this message." And then finally we have the main event. The man with the plan, the Brian Kendrick versus Akira Tozawa in a street fight. This is as well set a match as it could be, as these two have been building towards this match for months, and the story finally comes to a head. I'm not going to go into great detail. You really should go and check this match out for yourself. It's one of the better non-high-flying cruiserweight matches I've seen. And as a street fight, it was okay. They did use the ringside quite a bit, and a table, but I think they would have added a bit more to the match if they had used chairs or kendo sticks or something. But anyway, Akira Tozawa wins the feud when he finally puts the Brian Kendrick on the table and hits his flying senton from the top turnbuckle, putting Kendrick right through the table. He then throws Kendrick back into the ring and pins him for the big victory. He celebrates the victory in a bit of pain while Kendrick is barely starting to revive himself. It's a pretty good way to end a great feud. What Kendrick did to elevate Akira Tozawa was a job that money just can't pay him for properly. He really put himself, his heart, and his soul into looking bad so that Akira Tozawa could look great. He's worthy of a true jobber medal from me for his great work. I'm not sure where the Brian Kendrick goes from here, though. Anyways, that will wrap up the Cruiserweight action for this week. Once again, I'm the D-Job, Danimal Daniel Jobber, the Edmonton area's own and self-proclaimed Duke of the Cruiserweights, and you've been listening to the Jobbing Out with Danimal Daniel Jobber 205 Live and WWE Cruiserweight Report. Thanks so much for jobbing out with me this week. You can follow me on Twitter at Daniel Jobber with a capital D, capital J. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram at Danimal Daniel Jobber, all lowercase letters. Also, I hope you go to check out my website, DanimalDanielJobber.ca, where I have all my fun stuff, my popular cruiserweight power rankings, and a bunch of other stuff. Of course, you can also check me out on YouTube under my Daniel Jobber channel, where a lot of this stuff eventually ends up, along with other things I do. So once again, I'm proud to say that this podcast is brought to you courtesy of the Edmonton Sports Podcast Network. I'm proud to have my show alongside such great podcasts as Mike the Ref's own The Blown Call and his shorter podcast known as Quick Calls, as well as local wrestling shows CWC Evolution and RCW Breakout, featuring Mike the Ref's awesome commentary. And of course, as always, I'm big on the Sounds of Struggle podcast, featuring the always entertaining Chris Parrish and Maniac, two guys with amazing chemistry and amazing knowledge of sports. They talk about wrestling, sports in general, just about anything that they can come up with, and they're always funny, entertaining, just a great show to watch. Check out the Sounds of Struggle podcast. Do yourself a favor. Of course, remember, you can enjoy the magic of the Edmonton Sports Podcast Network on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and on the awesome mobile app Podbean. Once you realize how great the Edmonton Sports Podcast Network is, go to their merchandise shop at whatamaneuver.net/collection/Edmonton-SPN, all lowercase letters. There you can buy shirts of various sizes and baby onesies. Start your baby off early as a fan of the Edmonton Sports Podcast Network. And very soon I'll be proud to announce the launch of the official Danimal Daniel Jobber t-shirt. Anyways, be sure to follow the Edmonton Sports Podcast Network first off on Twitter, at Edmonton SPN with a capital E on Edmonton, and a capital S, a capital P, and a capital N. And finally, follow Mike the Ref on Instagram under Mike the Ref EDM, all lowercase letters. Make sure that whatever platform you check out our podcast, that you like them, thumbs up, subscribe, anything you do to show that you appreciate the work we do, so that you encourage us to give you more great content. And of course, let us know that you want to see more. And of course, remember what I was saying before, that we're now starting out on viz.me in protest of YouTube's treatment of pro wrestling content. So if you want to help, look us up and subscribe to us there so we can get verified and start using that medium to a greater capacity as well. What better way to show YouTube and its advertisers that wrestling content creators deserve more respect. So anyways, I'm going to wrap it up with that. You guys have a wonderful week. Till I see you next time, Jobber out!
Time to do the job! Behold the jobber of jobbers, Danimal Daniel Jobber.